With Miller Mott College's online programs, you can choose when you study. Our online programs give you the flexibility to make education work with your schedule. Earn your degree without derailing your life. Visit us online at miller-mott.edu. That's miller-mott.edu.
Welcome to Bite Size Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bite Size Bios, BSB. This is, I think, number 22? And today we are talking about Malcolm X. And it should be a good one. This one ran pretty long. I found myself kind of just, I wouldn't say rambling, but just, this is somebody that I do know from. I've read books about and watched movies and documentaries on, so I definitely had like a breadth of knowledge to kind of share. And we don't get to all of it. I don't even think I mentioned this guy's family in here. But before we get to that, as always, because this is a mini-sode accompaniment to How Did That Happen, we have to talk about last week's episode, number 64, vaccines. Hope I didn't trigger anybody by saying it or having to listen to it. You guys just, having like PTSD from COVID-19, but I hope it was a good one. I tried to cover a lot of information. If you went on the website, you saw that I only did pictures of like needles and stuff because I Googled smallpox vaccines and I'm still trying to forget what I saw. Or not vaccines, but Googled smallpox. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. I wouldn't, don't do it, but don't do it. Please don't do it. I'll never do it again. Like, it was, because I was like, let me put some pictures of smallpox up here just to keep people informed. And I legit spent the next half an hour just like closing my eyes and opening them, just like trying to forget what I just saw. But yeah, so we do find that smallpox is the main engine, the motor behind creating vaccines. I thought it was a pretty good episode. I really wanted to include more stuff about the vaccines that we have right now, like the COVID vaccines. But I just honestly felt that it was just too charged. That's not quite what this pod is about. It's just trying to talk about the facts here, or not the facts, but history. And I feel like there's just so much, because the technology behind the COVID vaccines is actually really interesting. From somebody who does not do science at all, I know a little bit about cells and stuff like that, but I don't know. It was good to see that science was able to come through a little bit. But yeah, I think that was a good episode. I mentioned in there that I've started to interview my dad for this kind of series that I think we're going to do it. I'm not really even sure what it's going to be, but the first one was pretty good. The first one was definitely good. And this won't be something that you guys probably won't even see until the summertime, if I'm guessing, that best case scenario, just because it's something I really kind of want to polish off. And it's long form and it's large. So I'm going to be working on that. I don't think there's much else to really say before we get to this episode about Malcolm X. As always, 7 days a week, hdthappen.com. You got all the extras. You got a works cited, photos and videos if they're up there. I put up some blog posts. I've written about a lot of different stuff. If you like this, give us 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You want to give us 2 stars and tell us what you didn't want to give us 5 stars? That's cool too. Constructive criticism is always welcome. I think that's pretty much it. So without further ado, as we're known to do, here is the episode.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
And the voice that you just heard was from a man named Malcolm X, who was originally born Malcolm Little on May the 19th, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. He was the fourth of 7 children. His parents were named Louise, Helen, and Earl. It's Louise, Helen, and Earl. Like I said, fourth of 7. His father, Earl, was an outspoken Baptist speaker. It says speaker. I do believe he was a preacher at certain times throughout his life. He and his family were followers of Marcus Garvey, And his father was a local leader of what was called the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Because of the KKK and their threats, Earl's UNIA, that's the Universal Negro Improvement Association activities, were said to be spreading trouble. So the family had to leave Nebraska, and they moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Shortly after that, they moved to Lansing, Michigan. And this kind of just became the same thing over and over and over again. Is wherever his father would go, there would quote unquote be trouble from the KKK and the local white contingency. Once they got to Lansing, the family was frequently harassed by what was called the Black Legion, which is a white racist group that allegedly burnt down Malcolm X's family home in 1929. What an odd name to be. Like, why would you call yourself the Black Legion if you don't like black people? Or, you know what I mean? Or things like that are black seem to be inferior to you. Why would you name your group after it? Little weird, just pointing it out. But so due to Earl Little and his civil rights activities, like we said, the family was frequently harassed by white supremacist groups, the Black Legion, for the most part. Which when you say it over and over again, it sounds like something out of The Watchmen. When you just like, the Black Legion is harassing these people, but it's real life. It really happened. And to go back for a second to talking about how his family home was burnt down, I do have a quote here from him where he says during that time that the white police and firemen came and stood around watching as our house burned to the ground, end quote. Was a quote from Malcolm X as he remembers basically his house getting burnt down in front of everybody. 2 years later, in 1931, his father would be murdered. Now this, of course, is still allegedly, but depending on who you believe, he was murdered. Earl Little's dead body was discovered lying across the municipal streetcar tracks. And despite the fact that the Malcolm X's family, the Little family, had been receiving, just harassment, death threats from these white supremacists for so long, the police still ruled it a streetcar death, a streetcar accident. And I will be honest with you, depending on where, because I'd read this numerous times in the research for this episode, but only a couple websites just literally say his dad died in a streetcar accident, as if, I don't know, he got ran over or fell off the train or got in a fight on the train. It's like, no, but then you delve deep into it, it's like his body was just found on the streetcar tracks. That's the connection between there being a streetcar accident and there actually being a death. I didn't actually get what they said he died of. There was this, it is pretty vague. They did say that based off because it had been ruled an accident, that basically voided the life insurance policy that they had, which I don't know if that's true or not. That seems kind of weird. That would seem to be almost the exact reason you would have insurance, is for accidents. I mean, it's like, that's why you have it. It's like in case something happens that you didn't plan for. But yeah. So they definitely disputed that, and it would take at least, what they say, I think it was at least 6 months. I don't know. It doesn't actually say. It does say that she disputed with the creditors for a while to get the money, and she was eventually able to get about $1,000 from the life insurance in payments of $18 per month, which would have been about $18,000 at that time. Because then I think another reason that they're saying, and because you get conflicting reports of this stuff, as you guys probably know, it's like they're saying that some reports say he committed suicide, and so I guess if you commit suicide, you don't get the that could also void your life insurance as well. So we get to after Malcolm's father's death, his mother remarries. Louise gets married again. I don't think I have the name of who she got married. She got pregnant again with that guy's kid. The year later, after getting married, she had a nervous breakdown and was committed to the Kalamazoo State Hospital. And so the children were separated and sent to foster homes. Malcolm would actually be able to get her out of that hospital 24 years later, but she would be in there for almost a quarter century. And so Malcolm attended West Junior High School in Lansing, Michigan, and then Mason High School in Mason, Michigan, but left before graduating in 1941. As a rebellious youngster, Malcolm would be moved from place to place. He spent some time in the Michigan State Detention Home, which is in Mason, Michigan, and then he would actually end up moving out to the Roxbury section of Boston to live with his older half-sister, Ella, who was from his father's first marriage. And This is the part. This is because I've read his biography. I've seen the movie. Very good, very good. Both of them are actually pretty good. But this is the part to me that sticks out as to, I would say, the beginning of Malcolm X, in my opinion. The rest of it is, I mean, it's obviously that's his beginning. You can't argue that. But this is the part where I feel like he comes into his own. He comes with, whether that be good or bad. Because once he gets out to Boston, he gets involved in petty criminal activities in his teenage years. He was known as Detroit Red for the reddish tinge in his hair, and also because he came from Michigan. So, he would turn into a street hustler, drug dealer, leader of a gang of thieves, which just sounds very Aladdin-y when you put it that way. But leader of a gang of thieves. And so during his time in Boston, he actually ends up also starting to go up to New York from time to time. I believe they say he gets a job on the New Haven Railroad. And ends up kind of going back and forth from Boston to Harlem, continuing to do his drug dealing, gambling, racketeering, robbery, pimping, all of the sort. They even say he had sex with guys sometimes, which, I think this is probably the third man in a row, actually, I think that we've done on Bite Size Bios, where like the salacious claims of like homosexuality are, kind of thrown out there to the masses to kind of, make people kind of paint your, kind of color your opinion on this person. But it's like this, we see as time goes on. I remember reading about Marlon Brando years ago, and then being like, oh, he was gay, or he was, but it's like, it's like times have changed so much that I don't know, it's just like being gay is not, it's not as like as interesting as it used to be, I guess, if it ever was, or just like there's so much, I don't know, the idea, like we talked about with Marlon Brando, who was also like basically a closet homosexual, and then, or it's also the way they get rebranded these days. It's like back in the day, it was like he was closeted. Now it's just like, yeah, people knew he had sex with dudes. It's like, really? Did they? But yeah, Marlon Brando with Richard Pryor, and actually that may be giving that away. I don't think I've done Richard Pryor. I don't think I've recorded him yet, but he's another one that I'm doing the research on, and he, just to let the cat out of the bag, he also was said to have sex with men. I think he had sex with a famous dude. I could be wrong. We'll definitely cover that. Back on track with Mr. X here. He befriended a man named John Elroy Sanford, who was a dishwasher at Jimmy's Chicken Shack in Harlem, which you just cannot make this stuff up. And he aspired to be a professional comedian. They both had reddish hair, and so basically this guy was called Chicago Red. Sanford was called Chicago Red, and Malcolm was known as Detroit Red. This is always an interesting story because the Chicago Red was, of course, a young Fred Sanford, who would go on to be a famous comedian, known mostly, depending on your generation, by Sanford and Son. Everyone likes. It's a good show. Crazy part about him, this is not his bio, but when he died, everyone thought he was faking it because his big thing was faking a heart attack. Which, if Fred Sanford, that was his thing. And so when he literally, I think he died of a heart attack, and everyone thought it was him going into a bit, and he was legit dying. That's just, you can look that up. It's life is funny sometimes. But yeah, so like we said, Sanford goes on to become Red Fox, and that's basically just a little tidbit to throw in there. We'll skip to, let's see, I don't know what we'll get to next. Oh, he was summoned to the draft board for military service in World War II, but he basically tried to play crazy and was said things to say like, quote, "I want to be sent down south, organize them inward soldiers, steal us some guns, and kill us some crackers," end quote. So he kind of just went in there and was like some crazy, like racist black dude, and they were like, you know what, you're good. I think we've got all the guys we need. So yeah, that was his little foray into military service. And so during this time, like I said, he's going back and forth between Boston and New York. And one of the times that he's in Boston, he and 4 other guys commit a series of burglaries that target wealthy white families. And, you can imagine how those families took it. They didn't like it very much. And in 1946, he was arrested while picking up a stolen watch that he had left at a shop for repairs. And it's like, is this your first time doing this, man? Like, you stole a watch, an expensive watch, and then we're like, it's broken. Let me, it's like people, it's like he doesn't know how cops work. So yeah, but that's because I always wonder. I looked for a lot of different things that they said, oh, and then he went to prison. It's like, what did he go to prison for? And so he got an 8 to 10 year sentence for I guess burglary, specifically for stealing that watch. For larceny and breaking and entering. That's what it says here. But yeah, his first stint there was at Charlestown State Prison, and then 2 years later he was transferred to Norfolk Prison Colony, which sounds worse than Charlestown State Prison. But while he was in there, he met a guy named John Bembry. John Bembry was a self-educated man that Malcolm X would later describe as the first man I had ever seen command total respect with words. And under Bembry's influence, Malcolm developed a voracious appetite for reading. Several of his siblings were writing to him about the Nation of Islam, which was relatively new among the black community at that time. They were all preaching black self-reliance and ultimately the return of the African diaspora to Africa, where they would be free from white American and European domination. So that was like what was kind of growing in his mind while he's sitting in prison, which is now, it's such a trope, it's such a cliche that, people, especially black people, go to jail and find religion, and they usually come out Muslims. I do wonder what the correlation is. Like, there's got to be something. There's got to be, because he obviously, I don't know if Malcolm X was the first one, but he was probably the most famous one. But they have not stopped doing that since he died. Yeah, he goes into all this. He ends up changing his diet. He stops smoking cigarettes. He doesn't eat pork. I think his brother Reginald goes to see him in jail and starts to kind of continue to spread, because it's his family on the outside is on the same thing as him on the inside. That's why I'm saying, I don't know, there's got to be some sort of correlation as to like going to jail and turning to Islam. I don't know what it is. I'm not trying to draw any sort of negative connotation. I'm just saying it's something that happens a lot. But I would love to. I've read a little bit of the Quran. We had to do a little bit of it in school for a class that I was in, but I've never read more. I would love to read more of it. I think reading any religious text, you can get a further insight into the people. It's like understanding, Christians. Oh, this is interesting. I didn't think I really even saw this. So basically, because he became so into Islam in prison, he got the nickname Satan because he was coming at all the Christians so hard. That's pretty wild to be so religious of like another religion that they're just like, yo, that dude is the devil. So yeah, he converts to Islam. He wrote to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was leading the Nation of Islam. Muhammad wrote back and advised him to renounce his past, humbly bow in prayer to God, and promise never to engage in destructive behavior ever again. It's a lot for him to say coming from him. We may do one on Muhammad one of these days. Elijah Muhammad. We really should. So again, Malcolm gets this letter, starts to pray, and is in the Nation of Islam now. Following the nation tradition, he replaced his surname Little with an X, custom among the Nation of Islam followers who consider the family names to have originated with white slaveholders. And I did not know until I read the book, literally, because I'm a younger guy who didn't live this, that I thought like he was the only X. You know what I mean? I thought he was like, when I found out everybody, like I could be Richard X. Like you know what I mean? Like it had so much more power when I thought it was just him. But it's cool. I get it. But yeah, when I found that out, I was like 22, 23, and it just took a lot of the oomph out of the X part for me. So he gets out of jail and kind of just starts going off with this Nation of Islam stuff. He founded the nation's newspaper, Muhammad Speaks. They could have got a better title than that, which he printed in the basement of his home, initiated the practice of requiring every male member of the nation to sell them, which is obviously going to be great fundraising. He articulated the nation's racial doctrines on the inherent evil of whites and the natural superiority of blacks. That was big for him, which is where I think the difference, obviously, between him and people like MLK is like he was going about it, as he said earlier in the clip, and I mean really almost by any means necessary, but he had a whole different kind of view about society and life and how it was supposed to exist, I guess. When you think about when you think about MLK, his idea was really was equality. It was like let black people and people of color, period, have what are basically the inalienable rights, the human like civil rights. That should be just inherent. But whereas like Malcolm X, it was much more like we see, like he was like white people are evil and like black people are superior. It's like I can't subscribe to that. I really can't. But some people can, and when you see with this, I think they were fighting for so much. You just get so many different ways that people fight. I feel like that's what we're seeing here. His stuff was effective though. His stuff was, somebody was listening. But when he was released from prison, there was only I think they said 400 members in the Nation of Islam in 1952. But eight years later, it had gotten to 40,000. I mean, he literally increased their numbers tenfold. And so the first time that America really becomes aware of Malcolm X is probably in 1957, after a man named Hinton Johnson was beaten by 2 NYPD officers. This guy Johnson got beat with a couple nightsticks. They beat him so bad he suffered brain contusions, subdural hemorrhaging. I don't know what that is, but it sounds bad. So someone ran back and told Malcolm X what was going on, and him and a small group of Muslims went to the police station and demanded to see Johnson. The police initially denied that any Muslims were being held, but when the crowd grew to more than 500, they allowed Malcolm X to speak with him. Afterward, X insisted on arranging for an ambulance to take him to the hospital because, like I said, he was that subdural. It was giving him bad stuff. But yeah, so he ended up getting taken to the hospital. But by the time he came back, there was like 4,000 people out there, like really being like, "This is a problem. This is not cool." But so I mean, of course, there's news cameras and everything, and so I'm reading more about this story to kind of get more information. But it seems like this because the thing that I think really got people, and this is kind of wild, is I guess once they realized that he wasn't going to get out of jail or whatever, the Johnson guy, Malcolm X comes out and kind of just with like a finger movement, just like tells people to just like all the Nation of Islam guys to just like dip out, and like they just do. And there was a police officer there who was quoted as saying, "No one man should have that much power," and I tend to kind of believe that to be true. I don't know. You could say a lot. I think I was listening to something that said power corrupts, and people feel different ways about that. But I do believe that's a little bit true. And so it is said to be this is one of the reasons that they say that the NYPD started to actually surveil Malcolm X and start to put like plants and moles and stuff in the Nation of Islam, because they were like this guy might be a menace. He would also get watched by the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover was like watching this dude, like he was not. They weren't really having it. And so I mean that's he did a lot. I'm sitting here scrolling through all the different things that will be on the website. Specifically, we're still trying to keep this relatively bite sized, but because there's a lot that just talks about what he did, the speeches that he gave, galvanizing the community. They were featured in a documentary called "The Hate That Hate Produced." A lot of different stuff like that. But I'm gonna kind of skip because to me, and I know his story a little bit. To really understand, I think the really bite-sized part of what happened to him is he got into this kind of the Nation of Islam, which had a kind of black power kind of angle to it, and kind of really had this idea of like we were talking about of like white people being the devil and black people being on a higher level, stuff like that. And then he goes on this Hajj to Mecca and hangs out with all these other types of Muslims who are of all different colors, shapes, and sizes, and he starts to really see the religion for what it is, and realize that it's not quite the same stuff that he's been hearing from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He comes back a changed man, and then basically starts to actually renounce the nation, and I have a little bit on that. This happens in the early '60s, and it really has to stem with it looks like there was some sort of what does it say here? Once again, this is the LAPD this time. The LAPD beat some Muslims out front of a temple. What they're going to say, temple number 27. And basically, after that, more than 70 officers showed up, and then they raided the mosque and then just randomly beat up some more Muslim people. And so this really made Malcolm X mad. And he wanted to retaliate violently. I can understand that. And but he sought the approval of Elijah Muhammad, and he wouldn't do it. And that was really one of I would say the last straw. It was definitely a turning point in him being like, okay, I'm not really, I don't know, we're not really on the same page here. And so on March 8th, 1964, Malcolm X publicly announced his break from the Nation of Islam. He said he was planning to organize a black nationalist organization to heighten the political consciousness of African Americans. And that will bring us to his assassination, which will come less than a year later. On February 19th, 1965, Malcolm X told an interviewer, Gordon Parks, that the Nation of Islam was actively trying to kill him. And on that same day, when he was preparing to address the OAAU in Manhattan's Audubon Ballroom, which is a 400-person audience that he was in front of, someone yelled out, "Inward, get your hand out of my pocket." And he tried to, I guess, Malcolm X was trying to kind of quell the situation, but the guy came forward and shot him twice in the chest with a sawed-off shotgun, which if you've ever seen one of those fired, it does a lot to humans. And then two other guys came out and fired semi-automatic handguns. So they were just like, we are taking this guy down. And Malcolm X was pronounced dead at 3 p.m. that afternoon, shortly after getting to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. Autopsy said that 21 gunshot wounds to the chest were found, where the chest, the left shoulder, arms, and legs, including 10 buckshot wounds from that initial shotgun blast. So he got 10 buckshot wounds off the first dude that blew him away, and they picked up 11 more gunshots. I mean, man. Just man. And they got the guys who did it. It was all those three guys. One dude's name was Talmadge Hire. The other guys went by those X's names, like they were Thomas 15X Johnson and then Norman 3X Butler, which I don't quite understand how that works. You just put a X as your middle name, and you still get to keep your last name. It seems like they got a little lazy there in the 60s, real militant in the 50s, but yeah, all three guys get sentenced to life in prison. And actually, Butler X got released in '85. He goes by the name of Muhammad Abdul Aziz. And he still says he didn't do it. Keeping that lie alive. The other guy also got out. Johnson X. He got out in '87. He also says he didn't do it. And the other guy, Talmadge, he got out in 2010. So all these guys ended up getting out of prison. That's wild. But yeah, I think that's pretty much. I mean, with people like this, you could talk all day, or there's so many different parts of them that you either want to say or you forget to mention. But I am trying to keep to the format of this show, is to keep it bite-sized. I feel like that's to me is the important, or not the important, but the interesting part of what this is. You could sit here and do an hour-long documentary on this guy, bro. If you had to fit it into 15 minutes, 20 minutes, what are the bullet point parts that you would hit on that you think the people need to know? And that's so, yeah. All right, hope you guys enjoyed that episode of Bite Size Bios. It wasn't that bite size, was it? I know. As I was recording it, I was like, this just keeps going, and I just kept scrolling. And I mean, when I tell you I cut out, if you go to the website, you'll see the article is just way longer than this little. I'm not even sure, because at this moment of saying this now, I haven't fully gotten the edit down, so I don't know how long it's going to be, but I definitely know it's not bite-sized. But yeah, I hope you guys liked it, learned a lot about Malcolm X. I do think I want to do one on Elijah Muhammad. These guys are so fascinating to me, just because people who attain power are fascinating to me in any capacity. And you see what happens inevitably when people get there. It's not even that when they get there, it's that people are inherently flawed. So when people gain power, they get put on a pedestal, and you think that these people are perfect because they've done something that you haven't. But then we're always so surprised when they're human, But I don't know why I said that. But so yeah, as always, if you like what you hear here, give us a like and subscribe wherever you hear this podcast. 5 stars is always appreciated. If you want to give us 2 stars, tell us why you didn't want to give us 5 stars. Love that. Constructive criticism is always welcome. HTTHappen.com for all the extras. At HTTHappen, anywhere the socials are found. I say that we're basically just on Twitter and Instagram, but definitely hit us up over there. Yeah, I think that's it. See you guys in a couple days with the next HTTH.
With Miller Mott College's online programs, you can choose when you study. Our online programs give you the flexibility to make education work with your schedule. Earn your degree without derailing your life. Visit us online at miller-mott.edu. That's miller-mott.edu.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.